Healing ancestral karma is deeply impactful work because when you heal yourself, you also heal your lineage. And this is not just good spiritually and energetically, but you will notice the results trickle down into your physical and material life. So in this video, we're going to explore 7 ways for you to connect with your ancestors so you can get insights to practice ancestral healing. All of our ancestors around the world who practice shamanism in every single continent, every corner of the world, they practice this idea of soul retrieval. So going into the past to create more harmony in the present incarnation, in the present timeline. So I'm going to share 2 scientific studies right now to show you that this is based in science. This is ancient wisdom that our ancestors already knew, but science is slowly catching up to this wisdom. So the first study is a study that was done with mice, and there was a set of mice and they would start to release a smell in the lab. And whenever the smell was released, the mice would get an electric shock. So over time, when they did this, the mice started to have a fear around that smell. And so even though there was no electric shock, when the smell was there, they were already prepared to be afraid of it. What's fascinating about this study is that not just their children, but their grandchildren as well inherited this fear. So 3 generations out. So for the grandchildren of these mice, they would be able to smell that particular smell, but there was no electric shock. And these grandchildren, they would exhibit distress, discomfort, and fear. And what was so fascinating about this is that their brain structure also changed. So why is this important? Because all of our family members, they have experienced some type of trauma. Maybe it was a food famine, maybe it was a war. And all of these fears, we are keeping held stuck in our DNA, in our cells, and in our subconscious mind. And that's why when we're able to clear these up, we're able to have more harmony in our lives. So let's say, for example, that in World War II, your family's house was bombed and they constantly had to keep fleeing away from the war. So even though you were not present during the war, or maybe it was even your grandparents, that fear of not being safe, not having stability, that gets passed down. And that's why now maybe you have a lot of anxiety, maybe you have a lot of instability, and you're constantly moving around from place to place, and you can't really create roots down. And so this fear of instability can get passed down. But when you're able to transform that fear that you inherited from your grandparents in World War II, now you're able to have more well-being in your life. This healing tends to ripple out through other members of your family. Why? Because we have energy cords with members of our family. And so you can think about it like the ancestral tree that's always talked about, the roots. The roots always receive and send out light and food and all of these nutrients. When you're able to be that courageous family member who is able to face these fears and transform them, again, you're not freeing just yourself, but you're freeing your lineage from this. And this is the second experiment which proves what our ancestors already knew. The fact that going into the past affects the present. This is Wheeler's delayed choice experiment. So what scientists did is they started to shoot photons, and in this experiment, they actually found that they were able to affect the past with the present choices that these scientists took. And so this is the scientific proof, again, for what our ancestors already knew. Hey, my name is IamSolTara. I'm a medium and I share alchemy practices from Atlantis and from ancient Egypt. If that resonates with you, I invite you to subscribe. So for the last 13 years, I've been traveling around the world, learning different healing modalities so that I could heal myself. And so the 7 techniques that I'm going to share with you so that you can practice ancestral healing. This is what I learned from studying from many different spiritual cosmologies and cultures, and also from my own journey in ancestral healing. Before we dive into the 7 ways to connect with your ancestors so you can get insights to practice ancestral healing, first let's cover what is ancestral healing. So ancestral healing is this concept where you are freeing your ancestors from any karmic loops that they may be stuck in. If we look back 12 generations, we have 2,400 ancestors, and the cumulative of all of these ancestors would be 4,095 ancestors. So you can imagine all of your 4,000 ancestors, they had many different activities, ways of life, and they had their own fears, their own challenges and issues in their life. And so the point of ancestral healing is for us to identify what are the biggest karmic loops that most of our ancestors are stuck in, and clear those out so that in this present timeline, we are free from those challenges and fears, and our families is free from those as well. Here are ancestral karmic signs that you have ancestral karma. So if you notice that there's particular patterns, like let's say for example, your family, they have a lot of trouble holding on to money. Somehow they end up spending it all, or something happens and then the money's gone. And you constantly keep seeing this happen in different areas of your family. It's likely that there is an ancestral pattern going on there. Or let's talk about anxiety being passed down. So I noticed this anxiety was being passed down from my grandmother's mom, and I started to notice that my aunt had anxiety and I was dealing with my own panic attacks. So that gave me a lot of clarity and compassion for myself to move through my healing process. This can also look like having authority issues, like for example, someone is always taking your ideas, or this is always happening to different people in your family. At work, there seems to be always this pattern of people taking their ideas or them not getting credit for the work that they're doing. So that would be an authoritative issue. Health issues can also be passed down through your lineage. Maggie is one of our alchemists, and the doctors told her that she would have to have her gallbladder removed, which happened to 4 other women in her family. So it was fascinating because after she started to transform this and she focused on healing herself, she said that before she could barely get down fruits and vegetables without having gallbladder spasm or stomach ulcers. It's been a month since she joined the Alchemy Academy, and now she has no more gallbladder pain. Can we talk about a miracle? I feel freedom again. And that is the key for us to free ourselves from these karmic loops, and in the process, free our ancestors as well. Why is it important to free our ancestors? Because even though our ancestors are no longer around in their physical form, there is still a version of them in the other etheric planes. For example, let's think about caterpillars. All the caterpillars are together in the grass on the ground, but when the caterpillar goes through its transformation process and it dies as a caterpillar and transforms into a butterfly, it no longer spends time on the ground, and instead it's flying around everywhere. So for the caterpillars on the ground, it looks like that caterpillar has died when it actually is flying and in a different state. It's the same thing with our family members. They are dead in this physical plane, however, they are still very much alive, just in a transformed state, in a light body, in the etheric planes. Now, sometimes our ancestors can be stuck in certain patterns, like for example, if there was a traumatic death, if there was a traumatic incident, and if you're open to it, they will be giving you signs, and these will manifest in your own life, like health flare-ups and financial flare-ups, relationship flare-ups, so that when you heal that in yourself, you're also healing them in the process. Just like the brave women who fought for the right to vote, or the brave members in your lineage who broke the cycle of poverty, or like the brave members of your lineage who fought back against injustices like slavery and colonization, now it's your turn to free your lineage. We benefited so much from our ancestors. Yes, we inherit their traumas and fears and anxieties, but we also inherit their gifts and the blessings that they were able to create in their lives, and we in turn are the fruits of that. So we are benefiting from them, and now it's time for us to give back to our ancestors by healing ourselves so that in turn they can be freed from any karmic loops they may be stuck in. Now it's your turn to make a big impact for your ancestors. So these are the 7 ways that you can connect with your ancestors so that you can get insights to practice karmic healing. So I'm going to go through the 7 steps, and at the end I'll share different cosmic portals that you can work with to make your ancestral healing work more powerful, and different signs that you can identify to know that the ancestral work that you're doing is actually working. Before we jump into the 7 ways of how to work with ancestral healing, the first thing you have to remember for all these 7 practices is do not judge your ancestors. Our ancestors, they did the best that they could with the times that they lived in. And of course, sometimes they did not always make the most loving or empowering choices for their families. But we cannot judge them, because if we go into this healing practice from a space of judgment, you're really going to limit the amount of information that you receive from your ancestors. And this is because your ancestors, they're looking to be freed. They're looking for freedom from these karmic cycles that they're stuck in. And in turn, you're going to become free. Here's an example of this so you can understand it in a deeper way. When I was doing my ancestral healing, when I first started, I would have a lot of resentment towards the paternal side of my lineage, because they dealt with a lot of alcoholism and a lot of abusive issues. So at the time, I would judge them for their actions, but later on, I realized that other mediums, they also tend to have issues with drugs or alcohol. So I come from a family of mediums, and as a medium, there's so much information being thrown out and so much data being bombarding you all the time that it's overwhelming. And so mediums turn to alcohol or drugs or other of these escape mechanisms because it's so overwhelming to feel everything. And so I didn't understand that at the time, but once I started to have more compassion with my ancestors in this way, I was able to create more compassion with my masculine side, with myself, and seeing them from this different angle also helped me, because I went through my own alcoholism journey. I'm a medium, and I also turned to drugs and alcohol to deal with all the overwhelming emotions and data that I was receiving. And so it helped me to break that pattern. And so for a lot of us, we are going to be this golden child that we are breaking these patterns that have been going on in our lineages for many decades. The first way you can start to connect with your ancestors to get insights for you to practice ancestral healing is to start listening to music that your ancestors listened to. Music and sound has the capacity to bypass the ego mind, and it has the capacity to unlock unconscious memories. So our subconscious mind, it works in a very mysterious way. Neuroscience doesn't even understand it yet. But this is the beauty of using sound as medicine. So maybe you can start to listen to a playlist. Create a playlist with music that your ancestors listened to. If you don't know what your ancestors listened to, then think about the culture where your ancestors come from and listen to that music, because over time, when you listen to that music, just different emotions are going to be unlocked because of the vibration of the instruments, the harmonies, and all of these subconscious traumas and fears and gifts as well. Remember, not everything we got from our ancestors is bad, so also be open to receive the gifts, talents, and blessings from your lineage, and these will start to seep into your conscious mind. If you're musically inclined, then consider playing an instrument from that culture that you come from, because that will start to unlock different memories within your subconscious mind. The second way that you can connect with your ancestors, and this one's really powerful to get a lot of healing insights, is start to have conversations with your parents, your great-grandparents, if they're still alive, with your uncles, with your aunts, with your cousins, and start to ask them specific questions. Like, for example, what types of personalities did your grandparents have? Or even your grandparents if you didn't meet them. So ask them about their personality traits. What did they do for a living? What kind of fears did they have? Did they have any physical diseases? And I think it's also important that you ask them, how they passed away, because that can also give you insights in terms of what are the different fears that may have been passed down from death. And try to talk to as many people as you can about this, because every little insight will unlock different areas for you. So when I was just in Bolivia last month, and when I was doing this, somehow a conversation came up around a curse around our family. And so I'm using alchemy to transform that for myself and my family. And so, be open, be curious, ask open-ended questions, because you'll be surprised about what types of information comes in through your family, through your living lineage. As part of this, I would also include to observe your family members. So the living family members, observe the little habits that they have, the nuances in their reactions. So you want to observe what kind of patterns are they exhibiting. Do they always exhibit anxiety around a specific area of their life, like finances or career or health? And do other members of your family also exhibit that? Because that will be a clear indication that this is not just an issue that one person has in your family, but when other people in your family have it too, that's a clear indication that that's an ancestral trauma that is being stored and passed down through your lineage. Doing this sounds simple, but honestly, it can give you epiphany moments. A few years ago, when I went to visit one of my grandmother's sisters, I noticed that she was exhibiting a lot of anxiety behaviors that I had. And I thought it was interesting because she had a completely different lifestyle to me. She lived in a different country. But then I picked up on the fact that my grandma also had the same reactions. And so I realized that, maybe it's not just my grandma's anxiety, but if her sisters have it too, then that means that they got it from their mother or their father or someone even before them. This insight helped me to have more compassion for myself, because I used to judge myself a lot for not being able to control my mind. I even had panic attacks. That's how bad my anxiety was. But truly, just observing these things in your family line, it will help you to heal yourself and just make that process have more clarity, because sometimes healing yourself can be a bit confusing. I also recommend that you have a specific journal or a specific notes in your phone, particularly dedicated to ancestral healing, because the more that you start to have these conversations, the more that you meet different members of your family and start to ask them these questions, the more insights you'll get and the deeper relationship you will have with your ancestors. And then you will just learn more of the different patterns that are showing up for you and in your family's life. Actually, when I was preparing for this video, I even had a lot of insights about the ancestral healing that I did just from preparing for this video, because we come from different lineages. So think about the 4,000 plus ancestors we come from. Because of migration, because of different families marrying into each other, etc., like we have many different ancestral lineages. And if you actually dive into this deeper and deeper, you will start to connect with your galactic lineages. And they have their own traumas from the galactic wars and all of the different dramas that happen up in the cosmos. Writing this down in a journal will help you to start to dig into the different ancestral lineages, but also it is going to be an outlet for you to heal yourself, to just allow yourself to process the emotions. So back when I started my healing journey, I was using poetry as an outlet for my pain. And now that I read my poetry back, I was like, whoa, I was very surprised about what I wrote, because at the time I was dealing with a lot of internal conflict, because I come from Bolivia. I was born in Bolivia. All of my direct family members come from Bolivia. But because of colonization, my ancestors are also from Spain. So I had this internal conflict that I had the blood of the colonizer and the blood of the colonized. And so I had this internal war within myself. And that's what I read in my poetry. And now when I look back at it, it was a lot of pain. And this now allowed me to understand this internal conflict that I have inside of myself. identifying this inner conflict now has helped me to have more self-acceptance for all aspects of myself. It helped me to have more self-love for all of the different versions of myself, because I did not choose to have colonized and colonizer blood inside of me, but I needed to learn to bring this inner conflict into harmony. And now I no longer feel the grief, the vengefulness towards the colonizing history within my lineage, because I learned to make peace with it. And so when I made peace with that, I've noticed that also my family has experienced more well-being, and I've experienced more well-being as well. This is one of the powerful ways that we can also transform the world, because if you think about all of the colonization, all of the global wars that happened, there was many different tribes and countries at war with one another. And we are inheriting those conflicts and those wars internally. And that's why sometimes our lives are very difficult, because we don't know where this internal conflict, internal confusion is coming from. But when we learn to harmonize this, not only are we going to be free from those conflicts, but we're going to experience peace, and we'll notice that being reflected in the external world, where there's going to be no more ping pong fights of this country versus that country. The third way that you can practice ancestral healing to get insights is by going to the land where your ancestors come from. So many of you have ancestors from many different areas of the world, and the first area you can focus on is where most of your ancestors come from. So focusing on the immediate lineage. So the land, it's like a living library. It holds all of the information of whatever has happened in that place. So when you go there, don't expect to understand things with your conscious mind, because your unconscious mind is connected to your energy field. Your energy field, you can think about it like Wi-Fi router, and it's absorbing the data from the air, from the fire, from the water, from the earth. So it's absorbing all of the information from the environment, and you're gonna start to get insights, and you'll start to have dreams. Like, you'll have very, very vivid, profound dreams with deep meanings your first few days when you go to the land. So also have your ancestral journal next to you when you are traveling to where your family comes from. When you travel to the land where your family comes from, it's important to practice forgiveness. Remember, sometimes we have known judgments and sometimes we have unknown judgments. So just asking for forgiveness for any judgments that you've had towards the culture or towards the lineage itself, because some people also like to do offerings. So you can do offerings for your ancestors, like throwing a crystal inside a body of water in the land, or digging a crystal inside of the land. You can also bring any type of other offerings that you practice in your own culture. I personally also like to do energetic offerings, because I know that my ancestors, they're not dead, they're still in the etheric planes. So I share my joy with them, I share my freedom with them, I share my well-being with them. So you can also send energetic offerings to your loved ones. When you visit the land where your family comes from, I also recommend that you go to the sacred sites there, because sacred sites, they're truly like encyclopedias. They're filled with so much information, because sacred sites are almost always built with crystals inside the stones, and crystals hold information. So this has a lot of wisdom, and this is also where there's a portal between the different realms. So you're going to be able to communicate with your ancestors much faster. So when I went to Bolivia last month, I went to Lake Titicaca, which is the sacral chakra of the earth. Lake Titicaca is also the birthplace of the Tiwanaku culture, which were the ancestors of the Incas. So I was connecting with the ancestors of my ancestors. And when I was at these temples, I was asking for permission. Always ask for permission before you go into a sacred site. And I was communicating with the guides there, with the beings there, with the guardians there. And I was just trying to get insights about the culture, the different practices they had, and also anything I had to clear up for myself and from my lineage, because sometimes when you just clear stuff up for yourself, it automatically takes care of your lineage, so you don't necessarily need to focus on your lineage. Getting these insights from the guardians and the spirits in these sacred sites was incredibly helpful, not just because of the clarity and the epiphanies, but they also gave me gifts. So they gave me gifts. Remember, also claim the blessings and the gifts, the talents from your ancestral lineage. Now when I go to sacred sites, it's much more easier for me to get information and talk to these beings. But before, it wasn't always like that. Actually, when I first started to work with crystals, I couldn't even feel the power of crystals for over a year, even though I had been meditating every day. And alchemy is truly what helped me to transform my blocks so that I could be able to be open to receive more insights. So if you want to learn how to transform the root cause of your blocks, if you want to learn how to open up your psychic abilities so that you can become your own psychic and connect with these beings that you're going to be meeting, with your ancestors that you're going to be developing a deeper connection with, I invite you to check out the Golden Age Alchemy Academy. This academy is where you learn to become your own healer and your own psychic. You can get more details in the description of this video. The fourth way that you can connect with your ancestors to receive insights is by connecting with the culture. So you can print out pictures of your ancestors and put them around your home, because it's important that this becomes a regular practice. You're not just doing this once and then forgetting about it, but it has to be a constant relationship building with your ancestors. You can also print out pictures of the land that you come from, so you start to connect with the energy of the land. This is something that I learned recently. I learned this from my trip to Peru, and I met Kumbi, who's a sound healer, and he is from Peru, and he was telling me about the power of patterns. So all of our ancestors all over the world, you'll notice that they have their own embroidery systems. So this is from Bolivia, and these are the patterns. And these patterns from all of our ancestors, not just from Bolivia or from South America, but these patterns, they're symbols and they give off a vibration. So they have an energy. And so when you wear the patterns from your ancestors, it helps you to connect with them. So it's sort of like a signal that you're sending out, and you're bringing in that energy of your ancestors in, and bringing in the energy of the culture that you come from, all its wisdom. So that's why I'm wearing this in this video. And Kumbi, this sound healer from Peru, he was explaining to me that our ancients, they would hide information in the symbols. So all of these symbols, they're hiding information. And that is because over time, as there were conflicts between different tribes and different countries, there was oppression over the wisdom from that particular spiritual culture. And so the wisdom was then held in the threads, which all of our ancestors, they were always threading information. So there's a lot of insight that you can get from wearing the traditional clothes from your culture. You can also cook the food from the culture. And this is important as it's going to stimulate different senses, because the different senses, they will unlock subconscious memories. And some of these memories are going to be memories from your ancestors. Remember, just like the mice, when they would smell that, it would remind them of the electric shock. But when you're cooking, usually feasts were a great time for celebration, joyful memories, and also a time when families would connect and share stories. So by you cooking the food and smelling it and tasting it, it will start to bring up subconscious memories. And don't expect these memories to make sense. Don't expect to get memories in the moment as you're cooking or eating the food, but you will have them at night in your dreams. They will start to slowly come up. So that's why it's important to have that ancestral journal. On that note, it's very important for you to honor your culture. At the mind level, it may not make sense, but it's a soul remembering. Some of us are drawn to specific cultures and we don't know why. Like, we are from the opposite side of the world, but we're drawn to those cultures. It's because it's a soul remembering. Most of the time, it's usually a past life, but even in your past life, you also had ancestors from that lifetime. So honor it and always be respectful of all the cultures that you're interacting interacting with. And the last way that you can connect with the culture is by learning the language. So learning the language, again, will start to create new neural pathways in your brain, and your brain will start to think about things in a different way. So for many of us, like, English is the most common language now, but nearly all of our ancestors, yes, all of them, they spoke something other than English. So maybe it's time for you to download a Duolingo app and start to learn a new language. The fifth way that you can start to connect with your ancestors is by getting a crystal from the land that you come from. So if you're not able to travel, maybe that's not accessible to you, then you can purchase a crystal from that land. So crystals, they are able to store information. That's why they're used in all of our electronics, because they're like data record keepers. So when you buy a crystal from the land that you come from, then you're able to download that information from the land via the crystal. So the way that you do that is via meditation, and I'll explain that deeper when we get to number 7. Plant consciousness is very powerful, and in the culture that you come from, there was a particular plant that your ancestors worked with because it was native to the land. So this is the 6th way that you can start to connect with your ancestors and unlock those subconscious memories, is by working with the herbs of the land. So this can be lavender, rosemary, sweetgrass. So for example, in my situation, it was working with the coca leaf, and my relationship with the coca leaf started to evolve over time. So again, remember that all of these relationships with the crystal, with the music, with your family members, all of these are going to start to blossom over time. So my relationship with the coca leaf started when I went back to Bolivia after living in the US. You drink the coca leaf tea in order to deal with the altitude sickness, and I thought that was fascinating. And in college, I ended up writing my university thesis about the global war on drugs, and I focused on the coca leaf because the coca leaf in the Andean tradition, it is a sacred plant. It's what connects us with Mother Nature, Pachamama, and connects us with our ancestors. But the World Health Organization, they labeled it as a drug. But saying that the coca leaf is cocaine is like saying that grapes are wine. So in my thesis, I talked about all of the political interests of why the war on drugs is very profitable and the coca leaf is sacred, and it's actually extremely nutritious. It's more nutritious in terms of its calcium content than milk. And so that's how it was a more intellectual understanding of working with the coca leaf. But on my most recent trip to Peru, they also practice working with the coca leaf, and they read the coca leaf to predict and for fortune telling. So there I started to understand, we were going to sacred sites with a group, and whenever I would chew the coca leaf, I would notice that it was more easier for me to connect with the energy of the space or the spirits of the space. And so now I work with the coca leaf in a more deeper and intentional way. So again, be open how your relationship is going to change with these plant medicines. The 7th way that you can connect with your ancestors for getting ancestral healing insights is by practicing ancestral healing meditations. So what you're going to do is you're first going to cleanse out the space that you're in. So you can either use incense, sound cleansing, you can use Palo Santo, or whatever your ancestors use to cleanse the space. In every area of the world, they use a different herb. So cleanse the space, and then you can choose to create an altar for your ancestors. You can put their pictures, you can put offerings, or you can give energetic offerings. And then you're going to focus on your breath and really calm your mind, because the goal is for you to connect with the subconscious mind. So taking a few deep breaths and focusing on your heart, then you can invite your ancestors into your sacred space and you'll feel them. And always I recommend starting off with giving gratitude, because that's going to help to expand your heart. And when you expand your heart, you're able to be a bigger signal for the information. So it's like your Wi-Fi signal will get stronger and your connection will get stronger with your ancestors. So once you feel your ancestors, just start to ask them questions like, what is helpful for our lineage to become aware of? Is there anything that they want you to know? When I did this, I asked my uncle, who transitioned from a sudden heart attack when he passed away, if there was any messages he wanted to share with his children and his wife. And so you can ask ask these types of questions. I also asked my uncle like where our family comes from, because when he was alive he had told me that we come from a different area of the world and not Spain as I originally thought. And so he told me that, and it was very surprising. So ask these questions, be curious, ask open-ended questions, because our ancestors also, remember, they have keys because of the lineage, the experiences that they went through. They have keys in their DNA, and you have their DNA, which means that inside of your DNA you have keys to doors in the etheric planes. So just like we see temples in the earth, there are also temple and sacred places in the etheric planes. And it's because of your DNA, the keys in your DNA, you can access those specific temples and doors that are only accessible to beings in your lineage, and you're able to gain a lot of insights from that. And that's one of the reasons why the Alchemy Academy is a group focused experience, because when we all are able to channel and get information from all of these different places and we bring them together, we're able to put all the pieces of the puzzle together, and we're able to evolve much faster because we get more clarity on what the actual truth looks like. Because remember, God, source, spirit, creation fractalized into many different rays of light, the colors of the rainbow, and we all hold the different rays. And when we put the rays together, we're able to see more clearly. And so if you're interested in learning how to unlock your psychic abilities safely, how to heal yourself, how to work with fire, water, air, earth, how to channel safely, I invite you to check out the Golden Age Alchemy Academy in the description of this video. These are the different portals that you can work with to connect deeper with your ancestors. So remember, don't just rely on these portals to connect with them, because this should be a regular process. It shouldn't be like once a year or 3 times a year. It's an ongoing relationship building. So the first and most popular and most powerful portal is the Samhain portal, which is the Halloween portal. The original Celtic tradition labeled it as Samhain, and then it got commercialized by the West into Halloween. But the Samhain portal, it is on October 31st and November 1st. And this also coincides with the Dia de los Muertos portal, which is traditionally celebrated November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So during this time, the veil between the dimensions is thinner. The Celtics, they would see the Samhain portal as their new year, and they would see the veil between the dimensions being thinner, which means that their ancestors would come and visit them. And so when we've hosted Samhain full moon rituals, we noticed that it was so easy to connect with our loved ones who crossed the veil. So this is a really powerful portal for you to honor your ancestors and to connect with them, and to also practice ancestral healing and clearing that karma. The other portal is the in bulk portal. So this one is on February 1st or 2nd. It changes every year, and this is also Celtic pagan festival that celebrates the midpoint between the solstice and the equinox, and the veil between the dimensions is thinner, which means that other beings from other realms can come to our realm and connect much easier. The other most powerful portal would be the eclipses. Eclipses are a powerful time when the veil between the dimensions is thin. The eclipse portals are much wider in terms of time, and they tend to be really powerful because also the sun and the moon are involved in that dynamic. So eclipses tend to be a time for us to clear karma, past life karma, but also ancestral karma. So you'll notice that it will be easier for you to transform that karma during eclipses. And eclipses typically happen between March, February, April, or that's the first round of eclipses, and the second round of eclipses tend to happen September, October, November. So every year it switches, but that's the general time frames. And the last one, this one is not so popularly known, but the Chinese Hungry Ghost Festival is celebrated in August. So this is when in Chinese metaphysics, they see their ancestors coming back and they do offerings for their ancestors. What was so fascinating to me was when I was living in Asia, that's how I found out about this. But the Aztecs and other Mesoamerican civilizations, they also originally celebrated their ancestors in August. So across the world, in East Asia and in Mesoamerica, these two cultures were celebrating their ancestors in August. But because of colonization, when Christianity arrived in Latin America, then the celebrations moved from August into All Souls Day on November 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. So those are some portals, and you'll notice that it will be much easier for you to connect with your ancestors during these portals. How do you know that the ancestral healing is working? Well, in your life, you will notice that these themes that your ancestors struggled with, you'll notice that those challenges are slowly dissipating from your life, or they're just completely gone. You can also see it actually intensify in your family members, because your family members are being pushed to consciously purge this. So for example, when my paternal lineage ancestrally was getting cleared up and I was doing some of that healing, in all of the males in both sides of my family, they started to have issues, and health issues and emotional issues. So I know that it was working because they were consciously being pushed to purge those imbalances and distortions out. So it's actually a good thing if you see these flare-ups, because it's sort of like the final purging being cleared for your lineage. Another sign is that you're randomly crying. So this used to happen to me a lot when I was dealing with my alcoholism issues. I would just start to sob out of nowhere, and I didn't know why I was sobbing. And then when I started to meditate more deeply, it would start to happen randomly, not even when taking drugs or alcohol. And this sudden crying happens because we're grieving out all of the things that our ancestors had to deal with, all of the different traumas that they were holding on to in the etheric planes. We're helping them to clear that out. So transforming it from them, and in turn freeing them and freeing ourselves from that. So don't judge yourself if you're randomly crying. That can actually also be a good sign. So remember to be compassionate with yourself and just allow the emotions to flow. Don't judge them. Seriously, it takes a lot of courage to do this work. You're a golden child. Maybe not everyone in your family likes this self-awareness, self-healing work, but the work that you're doing, I know it requires a lot of courage and it requires a lot of bravery. So I hope that you are being compassionate with yourself. And the biggest thing I can say is to remember that this is a marathon, it's not a sprint. So remember to be patient with yourself as you're healing through this, especially if you're the only conscious one in your family doing this work. You know, it can be very lonely and it can feel like you have all of your family's weight on your shoulders. But remember, your ancestors are there to support you. So ask them for their help to free yourself and your lineage from any of these karmic loops that may be influencing your family. I'm going to share a story with you from one of our alchemists in Australia. Her name is Tessa, to show you that what you do now, the healing that you do for yourself, is also going to impact your loved ones and your family members around you. Tessa was focused on healing her ancestral karma, and she focused on her paternal lineage. And she said, as a result of me working through my karma has been repairing my relationship with my father, to the point where he invited me to spend Christmas with him and that side of the family. It had been 8 years between Christmases together, so for us that was massive. Imagine the bonds that you have right now. Maybe they're not the strongest, or maybe you're having conflicts with your parents or your uncles or your aunts or even your siblings, but this work has a capacity to harmonize and create more love in your family's life. And again, it's not just your family that's going to benefit, you're going to benefit from this as well. So Tessa, she had unbearable back pain. For 20 years, she had severe back pain. After focusing on healing her ancestral karma and the trauma that she experienced in this lifetime, she said that her pain is now down to 5%. So again, you're not just freeing your family and creating more harmony and love, but you're also going to experience freedom, financial freedom, emotional freedom, physical freedom, and truly receive the abundance that you're meant to receive after clearing out these distortions in your lineage. What are the different ways that you like to connect with your ancestors? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for your likes, your shares, your subscribes. And before you start to connect with your ancestors with the meditation portion of it, I recommend you watch this, because this will help to clear your energy to make sure the information you receive is not as confusing and it flows more smoothly. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video. Much love.